5D chess with multiverse time travel, how to play. Just a heads up, this game is very confusing, and you will probably need to play around with the game to fully grasp the concepts. The rules are the same as regular chess, except for these changes. For a refresher of those rules, check out this video. Pieces are allowed to travel through time. The game begins like normal with a single chessboard. Hover over a piece or click on it to see that piece's available moves. Right-click to deselect it, or click the deselect button at the top of the screen. The black and white outline colors on the boards show which player's turn it is to play on that board. Once you make a move, it will highlight yellow pending confirmation. Click undo to change your move to something else. If the highlight color is red, then the move is not allowed. This typically happens by moving into check. To end your turn, you must press the Submit Moves button at the top of the screen or press the F key, and all your moves will be submitted. After each move, the board will duplicate to the right, creating a timeline that shows a visual history of every move made. You can navigate around the timelines by using the arrow keys, WASD keys, clicking and dragging, and zooming in and out with the scroll wheel. You can also press Tab or click the Cycle Boards button to recenter the view to an active board. There is a black or white banner that says the present that rests underneath the boards. The color of this banner indicates whose turn it is. Every board on top of this banner is considered to be in the present time, the here and now. Everything to the left of the present is the past, and everything to the right of the present is the future. On your turn, you must always move one of your pieces that is on each board in the present that is highlighted in your color. You may not move pieces on boards that are not highlighted in your color. You are not allowed to move pieces on boards in the past, present, or future that have already been moved. But you can move your pieces in the future if the board is highlighted in your color and you choose to do so. When a piece moves back in time to a point when moves have already been made, then a parallel timeline is created, branching off from that point with a new board. This is called a timeline branch or parallel branch. When you make a timeline branch, it will be created below the original timeline. When your opponent makes a timeline branch, it will be created above the original timeline. The present will also move to the oldest active timeline. If you create 2 or more timeline branches more than your opponent, then those extra timelines won't be active until your opponent creates more branches of their own. Additionally, the present won't move until your opponent makes more timeline branches of their own. Players do not have to make moves on inactive timelines if they don't want to. If you see a purple arrow on your side of the present banner, then you know that if you create a new timeline branch, that new timeline will be active. If you see a dot, then if you create a new timeline branch, that timeline will be inactive. Pieces move forward and backwards through time as well as across timelines. When moving through time, you are not allowed to move to a board where you just performed a move, because that would be equivalent to you moving 2 pieces in a single turn. This equates to every other board being ignored and grayed out. I'll discuss timeline branches after we have covered the basics of time travel. If you click on a piece that has an available movement through time, it will highlight all the available spaces on the other boards in green that piece can move to. Additionally, the History View icon on the left side of the board will appear. You can also click the History View button on the side of the screen at any time. The History View changes the orientation of the boards. The GUI will show you arrows of all the legal moves that piece can make, and omits the intermittent boards you can't travel to. Click on the board you want to time travel to. Then click on the space on that board, and the piece will travel to that space with a fun animation. To toggle the animation on and off, you can press the Time Travel Animation button in the top right. When a piece travels back in time, it will draw an arrow in purpley blue to indicate the use of time travel. The original space the piece was on and the space the piece arrived at will also be colored purpley blue to indicate the use of time travel. Pieces may not travel through time onto or through a friendly piece, even if that space is available. Pieces are allowed to travel through time and capture enemy pieces, but you may not travel through time through an enemy piece to the space beyond it. Each piece's time travel movement is as follows. The king can move one board backwards in time to the same relative space it is on, or any adjacent relative space. The king may not castle when traveling through time or after it has traveled through time. The rook travels backwards through time any number of boards on the same relative space that rook is currently on. A rook may not travel laterally across a board while traveling through time. The bishop must travel laterally, not diagonally, when traveling back in time. The available destination spaces for that bishop are one of the 4 spaces that are laterally adjacent to that bishop's current relative space on that board. Expand that spread of laterally adjacent spaces out from the relative center, 1 space for each board traveled backwards. The queen can travel backwards in time any number of boards on the same relative space that it is currently on, or the queen can move through time while also moving to one of the 8 relative adjacent spaces, expanded outward, 1 space for each board traveled backwards, similar to the bishop. The knight utilizes its L movement when traveling backwards through time. The knight can either travel 2 boards backwards on the same relative position that it is currently on, and then 1 space laterally on that board. Or the knight can travel 1 board backwards on the same relative position that it is currently on, then 2 spaces laterally on that board. The knight still retains the ability to jump over pieces. So, the only space that a knight cannot move through time to is a space occupied by a friendly piece. Pawns may not travel back in time on the same timeline they are currently on. The past is permanently set. You cannot move pieces that are in the past. Instead, anytime you travel through time to the past, you will create a timeline branch. Timeline branches are alternate realities you can play on. Pieces are allowed to move to other timelines in the present, as well as travel through time to the past and future of other timelines. A piece may not travel into the past of their timeline before that timeline branch was created. When you click on a piece, if a cross-timeline move is available, the parallel view icon will appear at the top or bottom of that board. You can also get a history view icon on the right side of the board to indicate if you can move into the future on a different timeline. Click the icon to see the available moves. Within the parallel view, or within the history view when there are multiple timelines, pieces may move to other timelines. You can do this by using the piece's normal time travel movement across boards that are perpendicular to that piece's timeline. A piece moved across timelines to a board where you also need to move a piece counts as a move on both boards. Additionally, you can perform a cross-timeline movement to other timelines based on the piece's traditional chess movement, with each timeline's board being treated like a single space on a large chessboard. Remember, you are not allowed to move to a board in the past where you have just performed a move. So, if you use the top-down view, you will need to skip every other board in the past or future. The knight may stay in its current relative position but move like an L, 2 boards in one direction, then 1 board at a right angle from the second board. Or the knight may move one board in one direction, then two boards at a right angle from that board. The knight may travel over void space to another timeline. All other pieces may not do this. The bishop may stay in its current relative position while moving across diagonally adjacent timeline boards. The queen can perform its time travel movements across diagonally adjacent timeline boards. The rook and queens can travel across timelines on the same relative space they are currently on. Rooks may not travel laterally while traveling to other timelines. The king can travel to any adjacent timeline board. The king may not castle across timelines or after it has moved to a different timeline. Pawns are only allowed to travel across timelines. Additionally, pawns may only travel across timelines in the forward direction towards their opponent's created timelines. A pawn moves to the same relative space they are currently on, one timeline board space forward. A pawn can also capture a piece in that same relative position to a timeline board that is to the diagonal right or diagonal left in front of them. A pawn can perform their initial double-step move option across timelines by traveling two boards in front of them while retaining their same relative position. En passant across timelines is not allowed. Pieces in the present, on any timeline, may give checks to any number of enemy kings that are in the past, present, or future on any other timeline board that piece can move to. Because pieces already moved in the past and future cannot move, they cannot check kings, and kings in those positions cannot move out of check. However, you can respond to a timeline check or checkmate by sending a piece back through time from a different board in the present to move the present back and thus temporarily remove the threat of check or checkmate. If neither player is able to check their opponent on a new timeline, eventually the present banner will reach the position of the original check or checkmate, and it must be addressed. If that check can't be addressed, then it is checkmate and the game is over. You do not have to checkmate in every timeline. If you checkmate an opponent's king on any board in any timeline, you win the entire game. If you are unable to move the present banner, for example, if you didn't have pieces on a board, or because your pieces have no legal moves on a board, and you aren't in check, then the game ends in a draw. The first player to checkmate their opponent wins.